us now. My name is Serena Bidwell. I use the she, her pronouns, and I am an able-bodied cisgender woman. I identify as a biracial Taiwanese American. Today I'm wearing a black blouse and I have the Diversity in Medicine Conference background. So before we start the panel today, we're actually going to highlight one of the abstracts that was submitted to the conference that we feel really exemplifies the theme of this upcoming panel. So I would like to start by introducing Sarah Adkins, who will give a quick presentation on her work titled Women in Orthopedics, Efforts to Help Increase Diversity Among Orthopedic Residents During the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Thank you. I'll get my slides up and we'll get started. Okay, like she said, well, first of all, can you see my, perfect. Like she said, my name is Sarah Adkins. I am a second-year medical student at the University of Kansas School of Medicine. I use she, her, and hers, and I am one of the authors on this study designed to seek effective ways to increase diversity among orthopedic residents. Our study is titled Women in Orthopedics, Efforts to Help Increase Diversity Among Orthopedic Residents During the COVID-19 Pandemic. We have no relevant financial disclosures for the authors. Our contact information and author affiliations are all listed here. Study background. A lack of gender diversity plagues orthopedic surgery in the United States. Women make up fewer than 6% of practicing surgeons and 12% of residents. To help address the lack of representation, an interactive webinar series for students was developed in coordination with the American Medical Women's Association and the Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society, two organizations that have missions centering on bringing more women to medicine and orthopedics respectively. The interventional webinars were designed with the help of some outstanding women program directors in orthopedic surgery across the United States, with the intention of addressing this lack of mentorship and exposure for interested applicants brought on by the closure of away rotations and in-person interviews during the pandemic. Webinar sessions were created to help bridge the gap, both currently existing for students who do not have home programs and for all students, as away rotations and in-person interviews were not available. These provided opportunities for discussion of careers, the application process, virtual mock interviews, and an open session with orthopedic leadership made up of both men and women in the field. After the conclusion of the interview season and a successful match day, a red cap survey was sent out to 231 participants across all AAMC regions, when we had a 22% response rate. Survey questions sought input regarding the applicant's perceptions and experiences, both before and after the application and interview processes, as well as the perceptions of attendees who would apply in subsequent cycles. The results were collected and analyzed to determine the utility of this webinar series and identify barriers to gender diversity from a student perspective. Our outcomes. Of those who are eligible, 90% of our participants applied to orthopedic surgery residency in 2020. The environment created by the women program directors during the webinars was reported as useful to very useful by 95% of our participants. A significant number of participants noted that curricular exposure to orthopedics in their didactic training, as well as musculoskeletal topics prior to medical school, increased their interest in applying to the field. Of the women who had attended our webinars and chose to apply to orthopedics, more than half had exposure to women and underrepresented in medicine attending some faculty prior to the webinar. 93% of our participants reported having a mentor in orthopedics as a medical student. 40% reported that exposure to women program directors and the in-practice interview virtual setting helped to decrease perceptions of gender bias. And 75% of our participants noted that these sessions increased their confidence during virtual interviews, all very important given the current state of the interview season. However, despite the exposure of applicants to these phenomenal women program directors, 93% having mentors of their own, more than half having exposure to diverse faculty, only 16% of our participants, including those who were applying in 2020, and then those who would be applying in 2021, significantly believe that orthopedics would actually be a career welcoming to women. This chart highlights the correlation for incidents of perceived bias and rotations in interviews from 2020 applicants in dark blue versus the responses for the question to, quote, is orthopedics welcoming to women, responses in light blue. The highest incidence of perceived bias and rotations in interviews does not correlate with the perception of orthopedics as a welcoming career to women, which we believe can be positively attributed to the strong correlations of mentorship and exposure to URIM faculty present in our participants. However, the perception that orthopedics is not welcoming to women is divided out into almost even thirds, with 65% of our participants who interviewed in the 2020 season reporting neutral or disagreeing to the idea that orthopedics should be welcoming. When the survey participants who did not apply in the 2020 cycle for various reasons, like taking research years or only being M2s or 3s at the time, were factored in. The number of students who agree that orthopedics would be significantly welcoming to women dropped from 35% to only 16%, as seen in the previous slide. While this low number is concerning, this means that more than 2/3 of our participants who applied to orthopedics in 2020 as their desired career reporting the belief that orthopedics would not be welcoming to them. Our conclusions. The series of webinars designed to address the unique issues faced by women medical students interested in orthopedic surgery was found to be useful to the vast majority of our participants. Given the dearth of women faculty and residents in some orthopedic programs, this format is being leveraged currently to continue to reach out to interested women medical students who do not have women role models or mentors at their home institution. In addition, our data indicates the importance of early and continued exposure to orthopedics in order to successfully engage women as future applicants. Furthermore, this study expands on prior research by demonstrating the critical role of exposure to orthopedic surgery prior to, in addition to during medical school. Unfortunately, it also demonstrated that exposure and access to mentorship by women orthopedic surgeons alone is not sufficient to change perceptions of the acceptance of women in orthopedic surgery. Increasing gender diversity within orthopedics will ultimately require the engagement of the entire orthopedic community to promote mentorship to all interested women at any point during their careers, and hopefully with this investment, help to shift the perception of orthopedics and highlight the important role of women surgeons within it. These are our references if you are interested. And I welcome any questions that you may have either now in the chat later or via Twitter or email at an even later date.
Thanks so much for that powerful presentation. Feel free as you're watching this, if you want to throw questions in the chat, we can also open them up again at the end of this panel, which your presentation leads wonderfully into. So our next panel is titled Diversity in Surgery, where we will hear from individuals at all levels of medical training who will address mentorship in surgery, as well as how they're working to build a support network for diverse identities. So to start this off, I will go ahead and provide a little bit of introduction for each of our panelists, but each of you are so much more than just a couple lines, so feel free to provide additional introductory information about who you are and where you come from as we open the questions. So first is Dr. Swanable. She's an assistant professor of surgery in the Division of Colorectal Surgery. She completed her undergraduate medical school training and general surgery training at the University of Wisconsin. She then completed colon and rectal surgery fellowship at the University of Massachusetts Memorial Hospital Medical Center before joining faculty here at Michigan in 2015. We have Dr. Tellem. She is the Lazar J. Greenfield Professor of Surgery, Section Chief of General Surgery, and Vice Chair for Quality and Patient Safety in the Department of Surgery here at the University of Michigan. She completed her surgical residency at Mount Sinai in New York and then her fellowship in minimally invasive and bariatric surgery at Mass Gen. Dr. Tellem also completed a Master's of Public Health at Columbia. We also have Dr. Mary Shen. She's a PGY4 general surgery resident here and founder of Anastomosis, which is a formal mentoring program for general surgery residency, as well as in addition, she's also the recipient of numerous teaching awards, including our prestigious 2021 Golden Beeper Award, which is presented to residents and voted on by medical students. We have Dr. Valbuena. She's also a general surgery resident here at Michigan Medicine, originally from Columbia. She completed her undergraduate education starting at a local community college, the State College of Florida. She obtained her bachelor's degree from the New College of Florida and then her medical degree from the University of Illinois in Chicago. And most recently, she received a master's degree in health and healthcare research from the University of Michigan. She is also a representative on the American Society for Transplant Surgeons Pipeline Task Force and a program leader for the LEADS Fellowship, which I will let her tell you more about. And then I think we have Alicia Hexmer as our final panelist here. She's a fourth-year medical student at the University of Michigan who is applying into general surgery. We are so excited for you and NASH to come next week. She is also the student leader of Masking Up, a student mentorship program for students interested in general surgery. With those introductions, I would like to open up to our first question, and feel free to also tell our audience a little bit more about yourselves as you answer this first question. But to start us off, what drew you initially to surgery? And this is open to any of our panelists.
I can go first. So my experience in surgery actually stemmed from being a patient of surgery myself. Actually, not many people know this, so it's interesting to talk about this at a big conference. But when I was 17, I actually got in a pretty terrible car accident and broke both my legs, and had to have X fixes and reoperations for months and months. And during that experience, I realized that surgery is absolutely one of the most vulnerable events that a patient can go through. And I think that having an excellent and yet compassionate surgeon makes such a big difference in a patient's experience. And then, as you know, my path to medicine is, or the path in medicine in general, is such a long practice in delayed gratification. And when I got to my surgery rotation, it was just incredibly satisfying to get to the root of the problem and fix things. It was intellectually stimulating, it was engaging, and honestly, I just loved being for my patients in those really tough moments.
I can go next. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be able to chat with some folks today and see some familiar faces. What drew me to surgery was, I actually didn't think I was ever going to be a surgeon. I thought that was the furthest thing from my mind. I didn't even know I wanted to do medicine until I realized that I was not into macroeconomics when I was trying to go to business school, and I decided I would just try to do some science classes, and then figured out that I really wanted to help people in communities similar to what I grew up in. We were an uninsured family, and it was really important to me that I was able to provide care for people who were in similar situations to my own. When I was in medical school, I thought, well, the best path forward might be like emergency medicine or family medicine, because I'd have access to some of these individuals, like a little bit more hands-on. But then, so I did my general surgery my general surgery rotation first, just to try to get it out of the way, and I ended up falling in love with it, which was very unexpected. I just thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to be a general surgeon. Like, I'm not a good student. I was not built for this. But then I had one faculty member who I was super interested in it, but I didn't think I had the capacity to do it. But I had one faculty member who said, you really should think about surgery. And that completely changed the trajectory of my career. And the reason I loved it is so much is because I love the acuity of things, and I love to be able to see the results of my work. I love the community feeling of being a surgeon and working on a team. And it's been really rewarding, and I'm still able to take care of vulnerable patients. I don't know, I can't remember, Serena, if you said this, but I work at the VA. And so some of these, a lot of these patients don't have the same type of resources that we would normally see if you were, seeing a patient at Michigan Medicine. So.
I can go next. Hi everybody. It's such a pleasure to be back at DIM. I am Valeria Valbuena, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am a cisgender, able-bodied woman, and I am a general surgery resident, and I've been so for about half a decade, and I got like another half a decade to go. I grew up in Colombia, and I grew up in a rural area with like pretty aggressive healthcare shortage, healthcare practitioner shortage. Just in general, it was like very challenging to obtain like secondary or tertiary care. I also, Mary, got in a really bad, not car accident, but motorcycle accident. I still remember having like this very janky X-Fix. Thank God that my knee still works. I was always interested in medicine, mostly because, in those very few occasions that I had the opportunity of going to the doctor for my vaccines, because my mom did believe in vaccinations, not in anything else. I drank a lot of teas when I was growing up. I was just very impressed by their ability to connect with our community, and for them to be of such great service. And I decided really early on that I wanted to be a doctor. And then when I started doing my career exploration, I spent a lot of time doing like primary care, shadowing back at home. And a lot of that was like integrated OB, like mom, healthy baby, assisting in deliveries. And so my first idea was that I was going to be an obstetrician. Comes to show that usually, like, it's actually very interesting how very little things can sway you one way or the other one when you're deciding on a specialty, and how like a good experience can really set you on a path. And then when I started medical school, I shadowed OB, and it just didn't necessarily feel the same way that it did back at home. And I was very fortunate to be in this mentoring program when I was in medical school that matched me with just out of nowhere with a surgery resident. And so one of the very first clinical experiences that I did in medical school after I was like, well, B's not working with surgery. And I fell in love with it very, very, very early, like before I had even done my rotations. And I sort of like went in with that mentality that that's what I was going to do. And, there's sort of like the two camps of people. The people were like, oh, you should definitely do it, including some of my primary mentors, but also so many people that told me that I couldn't. And there has nothing, I mean, this is probably one of my many toxic traits, but there's nothing more motivated to me than someone telling me that I cannot do anything. And so I always joke with my mom that I will be successful out of spite. And so as soon as somebody told me, oh, you cannot be a general surgeon because you're like a woman, and like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I was like, oh, I will show you. And so that's how I landed here. And I'm Dr. Swanebles and Dr. Tellum's problem.
You're a good problem, Val. We're excited to have you here. I remember you even from when you were a medical student coming over to CHOP, and we knew then that you would be a force to be reckoned with, and we're super excited to have you in the program. It's interesting hearing everybody's stories and sort of the similarities and the themes through it. I was reflecting. It took me a second to answer because I'm out a bit longer than all of you. And so sometimes I have to kind of think back a little bit further as to sort of what those motivations were. And I think the reason I was interested in surgery came from my father. So my father emigrated to this country in the 1970s and actually wanted to be a doctor more than anything, couldn't get a green card or citizenship. So ended up going down to Mexico to start medical school in Guadalajara. And one of the things that we all don't love right now, loans, didn't come easy to persons who don't have citizenships and don't have green cards. And I was born and he couldn't afford to finish medical school, and his family wouldn't help him because they didn't have the means to do it. So he ended up not being able to complete it. Started as an apprentice at a jewelry store and said, he always tells me, you have to have a skill. He goes, the economy goes up and down, sales can happen or not happen, but you have to have a trade. And so he became a watchmaker. And so for my entire life, the man's turning 80 this June and still does it. I've watched him tinker sort of on the insides of these dials and of these fine Swiss movements and all these different things. And it's his greatest joy in life to sort of work with his hands. And I think he kind of passed that down to me. And so when I went to medical school, I was naturally drawn to procedural based fields. I really loved the acuity. I loved the instant gratification of knowing that you could help someone. But I remember when I told my father I was going into surgery, thinking he'd be so proud that I was kind of going through this lineage, he looked at me, he goes, girls don't do surgery. And I go, why did you send me to medical school if you're not going to support me? And it's funny now in retrospect because he does support me like 120%. I think in his mind, what he was trying to say to me is, he didn't want me to work so hard because he'd worked so hard his whole life, carried multiple jobs, 6 days a week, still does to support us because we didn't grow up with much. And he wanted what in his mind perceived as something better. And whereas I thought this hard work was like an homage to what he did, he looked at it as he wanted me to like not have to struggle in the same way he did. And he, of course, is super proud and supportive of everything that I've done. And it's been a tremendous career, and it's a pure joy to be able to be part of our department and to get to see our next generation come up with Mary and Val and Alicia, who's going to be joining our ranks next year as a surgery resident. We'll find out where in a couple weeks. And I'm just really honored and grateful to be here today.
I think that leaves me last. Wow, what a privilege to be here with these amazing women who have all mentored me at some point throughout this journey. When I think about why surgery, like Dr. Tellum was saying, a lot of the same themes come through about the intrinsic teamwork and the balance of procedural and medical management. And really what it comes down to is something Dr. Shen was talking about, of the privilege of being there with patients through the uniquely vulnerable time that any surgery is, routine, complicated, or unexpected. There's something really special about that and that kind of patient connection. I also rotated at the VA and found that to be an incredible privilege to work with that underserved population of veterans. And the difference you can make in their lives through very small changes in communication skills, being somebody's surgeon, you leave scars that they carry for the rest of their lives, and they're going to remember how that experience felt and you get to impact them through that. It's funny because I came into medical school with an inkling that I wanted to do general surgery, and I lost track of that somewhere along the way. I think there really is a lot of external messaging of that's not for you. And it took me a while to find my mentors. I'm a first generation student from a low income background, and most of the exposure I had to medicine outside of medical school was in primary care. And so I sort of shifted to that and then went through each one of my core rotations, falling in love with it, and ending my clinical year on surgery honestly felt like coming home. And all of the surgeons I've talked to since then, hearing their stories and listening to why they chose surgery, it really is that very cliche, like, these are my people, this is what I'm going to do with my life and help other people do along the way.
Thanks so much to each of you for sharing a little bit about your stories. I think, as Dr. Tellem highlighted, it's interesting to hear common threads through each of the stories, and then also recognize that that the department and that the field of surgery really does embrace all these different backgrounds as well. So our second question is, what does it mean to you to be a good mentor? And then what does it mean to be a good mentee? And for those of you who have involvement in different mentorship programs, feel free to speak to those as well. And maybe we could just go in the same order for this question.
So in terms of being a good mentor, I think that as you progress through your medical training, there's always opportunities to be a good mentor. So even as medical students, you have the opportunity to be a good mentor to pre-meds and other people who are interested in getting to where you are. But first and foremost, I think the most important thing is caring about your mentees as human beings first, rather than medical providers, researchers, future leaders. I've been fortunate to experience both of this from Dr. Swanable and Dr. Tellem. And I think that they've both, and this is also where I've learned to be a good mentor, is from, the good mentors I've had. I feel like they've both, tried to understand my values, what makes me tick, and having my best interests in mind to help me get to the goal that I see for myself, even if it's not in line with their own paths of colorectal surgery or being like the leader of University of Michigan surgery. but basically, I think that, the fact that you can get the support on your own personal journey is incredible, and having mentors that just support you in that way, no matter what.
That was so sweet. Thank you, Mary. It just warms my heart to see you because I haven't seen you in a little bit. But also to just, I think what Mary says is totally how I feel about it and how I approach being a mentor and a mentee. I think caring about the people that you are working with and investing in these individuals is really important. You probably have heard of, things about mentors and sponsors, and sometimes the same person can be both. I've had a lot of really good mentors in my life, luckily more good than not so good. And I think one thing that I think about often is that a good mentor is somebody who's generous, who's caring, who is responsive to you and your needs. But it's also a bi-directional relationship. It's not just that the mentee can be passive and not participate, but they have to be willing to be mentored, and they have to be willing to work with you and get feedback, even if it sometimes is hard feedback.
I honestly, I don't think where I will be. I have no idea where I will be without the mentors that have, it's always a very organic process, or at least it has felt like that for me, mostly because I didn't necessarily, I went to school, undergraduate and stuff, or high school back in Colombia. And I didn't really understood that concept of mentorship when I came to the United States. I moved to start undergrad, but I was mostly just trying to find, get things done, and trying to find people to help. And I think that you have to think, as you move over in academia, I think that we can get a little bit more self-centered, because there's a lot of things that we have to do. And I think that the thought around being able to create space in your career as a physician, regardless of your specialty, to sort of give back and help others, is something that maybe sometimes we see as the thing that you will do when you're a faculty, or when you have more time. And I think that the most important thing, or like the thing that I always think about in terms of mentorship, and I always tell my mentees this, is that you will never have more time than you do right now, this minute, wherever you're sitting, because things just it's different busy, but you just get busier. And mentorship and being a good mentee and a good mentor is something that takes, like, you need your reps. And so if you decide that like the time that you're going to start investing on others, or like, really focus on like being a good mentee is going to be when you're like a faculty or whatever, you're going to be behind the 8 ball by the time that you get there. And so this is something that you have to be very intentional to do right now, as soon as possible. And like, as you're talking to your, whoever your mentees are, to tell them sort of like, these are the steps that you need to take to be able to elicit the best and like the best results out of your mentorship relationships. I think in terms of being a good mentee, just like Dr. Swaneval said, like, you have to be engaged, and you have to realize that like the trains of communication are a little different depending on the person, that like how separate you are from this mentor or sponsor. There are people that are going to be on texting basis with you. I think about like my resident mentors when I was a medical student, or my peer mentors when I was a student. And then there are the people that like you email every 3 or 6 months. And I do believe that like a lot of that communication, elicitation, and the maintaining a relationship does have to be a little bit more on the mentee and at the beginning, just because when you think about like all of the people that one person mentors at a certain point in their career, can be a little easier for us to lose track of you than for you to lose track of you at the beginning. And then I think that like that early like establishment of a meaningful relationship with someone that you're looking up to, or that you're wanting to establish a relationship with, requires a little bit of work on your end, and it has to be intentional. And so I think about people like reaching out and like, wait, like with agendas and sort of like formal intentions, versus someone being like, oh, can we talk? Or like, oh, can you be my mentor? Like on the first DM that I get on Twitter. And so we'll talk a lot more about that. But I think that communication aspect is one of the things that I focus the most about as a mentee. And then as a mentor, I think that removing yourself, it's so easy as a mentor, especially like really early on when you're just starting, to sort of like reflect a lot of yourself, your insecurities, the things that you want on your mentees, and then like trying to be like, no, you personally have like your own agenda and your own like the things that you want to do, and there are ways in which like your mentees play a role onto that. But I do think that like being able to separate yourself from that and decide like, how can I, within like my ability, like help this student, mentee, resident, peer achieve their goals, which might be completely separate from my goals, and that might sometimes like conflict with the things that like I want for them. So like that paternalistic view of mentorship, I think that has gone over to the wayside. There are times in which I'll be like, I actually know better, you should probably do this. But the majority of the time, in terms of direction, I think I see myself more of a facilitator. And I think that being a facilitator as a mentor is one of the best things that you can do at any stage of your career.
So I've been thinking, and I keep thinking a lot about this because my viewpoint on it continues to evolve sort of the older that I get moving forward. I think the most important thing that I've learned is one person can't be all things to you. I think sometimes when we think about mentorship, we think of a mentor or a person. And truly, I think many of us are successful not because of one person, but because of a team of mentors, right? And for me, that shifted from, truly hierarchical and now more to sort of peer mentorships. And something I've been relying on much more in the past couple of years, which have been delightful. But mentors come from all levels. We talk about bi-directional. My mentees mentor me. I have people that I lean on when I have different issues. My peers have been phenomenal. And having a multitude of people and knowing who's really great around what your specific issue and topic are and who can help you. Sometimes mentorship is just one question. Sometimes it's a longitudinal relationship, and that's okay. Things come in different forms and flavors. The second thing that I think that I've learned is mentors and sponsors are two different people. And sometimes that's okay. And sometimes it's not okay. Not all of your mentors are able to be sponsors. Somebody who's a sponsor sometimes are the people who are sitting at a table and are the ones that are able to speak up for you or advocate for you if a position comes up or something happens, and that person may not even have the bandwidth to mentor you fully, but may really also care about you and might be sponsoring you sort of on the back end. And so it's important to make sure that you have both in your career so that you have people talking about you positively in some of these conversations, when they happen before. And then I think about when I take on mentees and my approach to mentorship, when somebody's sort of part of our team, part of our lab, part of, coming in, is really this concept of meeting somebody where they're at. I don't need to recreate me and who I am. I need to help somebody find who they are and their path and where they want to go. And my job is to empower that and to resource them to do that. And when I think about mentorship, I think of it as a holistic process. So anybody whom I mentor, it's not just about, okay, what project? I mean, I do have people I write papers with and stuff. That's a form of mentorship, but I don't consider that, like a true mentor-mentee there. And Mary kind of spoke to this. It's having personal life conversations about them if they're open to that, trying to figure out what makes them tick, what do they want to do, trying to match inquiry, especially around research, around their interests, trying to figure out what makes them excited, because the truth is a lot of us do research to research, but if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's really, really hard on those days where you're tired to start writing and to do the things that you need to do. And then just trying to figure out where their career arc is, which is, I think, really important and something that I think I wish I'd been more intentional about as a resident and didn't really have that opportunity until people really just sat me down and was like, what's your niche? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? As a mentee, I love, as Val put it, people who are engaged, people who want to be there, people who give back, people who bring something new to the table each and every time. Someone whom I learn from, as much as they learn from me. Everybody has something to teach, even our medical students, undergraduates who I work with. So I really love people who are very passionate and engaged. Things I don't like, there are two great papers people should read. One is Mentor Malpractice by Vineet Chopra and JAMA, talking about all the bad things mentors can do. But there's also Mentee Malpractice, written by Vineet, which is hilarious, written by Vineet's mentee. And she wrote this beautiful article on sort of all the things that can go on, like, I can't chase you down. I don't have that time, even if I want to, the ghosting or the not being able to showing up. And so both parties, it's a contract, right? And both parties have a responsibility and both need to sort of own up to that. But I'd encourage everybody to look at those two JAMA articles.
Such great points by everybody that captured more than I could certainly say. I love the points about treating your mentees as human beings first. I think that's particularly important for underrepresented in medicine students. There are a lot of aspects of being a mentee that can be difficult to learn, including that like early maintenance of the relationship that's so important, that is on the mentee, that it's okay and you do deserve to ask for these people's time, that they mean it when they say you can have this time and they're investing in you. That can feel very difficult to trust as an underrepresented student, and to believe in yourself. And so a good mentor supports all of those things, as well as the soliciting the mentees' goals and kind of supporting them through that. I feel that strongly. And Dr. Tellem, I'm trying to remember the first time we met, the way you said it. You said something about your job being to ask certain questions, and I can't remember the way you phrased it. Do you recall?
No, but we've had tons of meetings since then. Alicia came and sought me out and found me. So I've been very fortunate to be able to get to know her and mentor her through her surgical journey, as well as through a capstone project, which we need to touch base about.
I'll email you, I promise. So I actually was matched with Dr. Tellem as a mentor through the Masking Up Pipeline Initiative that I then took over as a student director, which I felt incredibly fortunate because it was such an excellent mentorship match. We had similarities in our stories that really just resonated, and the amount of clarity that she helped bring to me and my narrative as I was crafting my personal statement. And I knew that I loved surgery, but the way that she helped me articulate those points and kind of reflect back the jumbled words that I was saying into something so much more refined that captured the essence of the message was really transformative in my journey through this application cycle. So thank you. And I'll stop there.
Thanks for all the wisdom and even the practical points about how to maintain the mentorship relationship. I think you can all tell it's pretty evident here that mentorship runs deep in the culture of surgery at Michigan Medicine. For our next question, we'll start with Dr. Tellem and then maybe Dr. Swanable after. How have you seen the field of surgery evolving in terms of diversity and inclusion? And what are a few things that would be at the top of your list to address?
You know, it's interesting. I was reflecting on this earlier. This is my 10th. I was operating this morning with actually Vanessa at Brighton, and I was reflecting that this year is my 10th year in surgical practice, and time is fast and time is slow. And kind of thinking back to when I was a resident and what I saw versus what I'm seeing now, it's only been a decade, but it feels like 1,000 years has kind of gone by. Not because I think we've had or found any sustainable solution, or I think that we've really solved our problems, but what I love about right now is that we're talking about it and we're seeking truth and we're asking questions and we're saying, well, why not? You know, we're looking at things like females disproportionately being represented at upper level or upper echelon leadership positions, and instead of accepting it, we're asking why. And not only are we asking why, but we're empowering people to answer those questions and to figure that out. We're seeing historically marginalized group, you know, instead of just saying, oh, well, people don't want to go into medical school, instead we're asking why and where are we starting? And these issues are starting in kindergarten. You know, it's not soon enough to get involved when somebody's in college, because you've already missed out on a whole population and seeing brilliant initiatives like the Hope Initiative and Doctors of Tomorrow that Erica Newman and John Finks are running. And I think we have a ways to go, but I'm so optimistic with everybody on this call, everybody who's at this conference, the panelists on here, that we've been empowered to not just sit back and accept our surroundings, but really to challenge the current norms. And I think we have years and years and years of work to do, but you don't get anywhere without asking questions, having an environment where you're allowed to ask those questions, and having an environment where you're allowed to do something about them as well. And so I think I've seen a change from you just put your head down and you do your work and you just have to be better and you move forward and you try to ignore the noise around you, to now saying, no, we can't ignore that noise anymore. We can't just look out for ourselves and say, okay, well, I'm fine, so things are okay. We need to turn around and reach back. We need to ask these questions so it's better, you know, for everyone else. And I was humbled to be invited to this panel, which I guess means that you guys think I'm helpful to be part of this solution, and I'm really excited about that. But what I'm more excited about is seeing Mary and Alicia and Val and everybody here who's really just taking it that extra step forward. So I think that's a little bit about what I've seen in the last decade, I guess, of practice.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with Dr. Tellem. I think first and foremost, when you first said that, I said we're just barely scratching the surface of the problem. But I will say that in the past, I guess I've been a faculty member for 6 or 7 years now. I feel like this would have never really been talked about so explicitly and so openly. I think we are the fact that we can come together and talk about it, and I think that's the first step. I think just having it be something that we can talk about is going to be the thing that we need to do. I think we're doing a better job in terms of recruitment. What I'd like to see, because I think that was one of your questions, is how to make sure that we retain individuals and that we support individuals so that they're successful. I think, again, there's a ton of work that needs to be done, but I do think that the fact that we're even just here is such a big step from, you know, not that long ago. So I think that there's, again, a lot of work, but at least we're moving in the right direction. And we just have to recognize that this is going to be incremental and slow.
And then Dr. Shen or Dr. Valbuena, if you want to talk about this in the context of the mentorship programs that you guys are both a part of, and how that might be working to move forward in terms of diversity and inclusion in surgery.
Sure. So it's funny because I feel like I have been a resident not that long, but we talk about this all the time, at least within the micro ecosystem of my own residency, of how different things look from just when I was an intern. Like, I think we graduated our last all male, like, white cis male class of chiefs the year before I started. And when you look at our residency program now and what it looked for a long time, it's just it's incredible, and it's heading with, you know, the usual sort of like growing pains of trying to do DEI work in the correct direction. So I am the the founder and the program director for Leagues, which has been like an incredible effort that has been carried in large part by you guys, the medical students at the University of Michigan, without I could not have done this, because I've been a clinical resident for 3 years around the time that we were planning this. And the program is assigned to creating opportunities for students that are interested in furthering diversity and gender equity and surgery through research and advocacy. And it honestly, it started from the incredible like feeling that I got when I got here to Michigan. I went to school somewhere else, of the access that the department provides for students, and, you know, this like very strong focus on mentorship and just like taking students from the beginning till the end, till their careers as surgeons. And I had very great mentors, and I was very fortunate when I was a student, but there were a lot of colleagues who weren't. And I think that I wanted to be able to share those aspects, those great aspects of the program with students that didn't necessarily had access to those opportunities, and that they themselves, because of their sort of intersectional identities and also where their research interests and their social mission, they will be a good fit to spend time with us. And so I think that it is so slow. We just selected so it's a trainee run program. So there are residents and there are students, and we just selected like the class from our class of interns, the people who are taking over when I'm gone. And I'm like already thinking I'm gonna like leave. And it seems fast, and it is just really exciting to see that like things, you know, you get like this hunch that programs like this ones are going to work, but you don't know, because, you know, for a long time, there has been a lot of de-investment or very little investment on this. And I like, you know, I don't know that too many things, but for this particular thing, I know that I'm right. I'm like, if you just put the right people together, like we have so many great people and opportunities here. And I'm like, if you just give someone a chance, like the right person will take it and run with it. And so seeing that work, like seeing our students is still, you know, this is our third class of fellows, is still interested in surgery, people taking research years, writing papers, like really taking it to the next level and taking advantage of those opportunities has been wonderful. And it makes me think that, like, you know, taking some of these models, like Mary's program it's outstanding, and making it so that it can be not necessarily like, you know, the special thing we have in Michigan, but like the thing that everybody does is incredibly exciting, because I know it's going to work. Like it worked for me, it worked for Mary, and I definitely think that it's going to work for other institutions that adapt sort of these models of mentorship moving forward, especially for women and UIM students.
I've actually been incredibly inspired by Val's work, and the fact that she was able to do it as a clinical resident definitely helped me believe that I could create my program as a clinical resident. But basically, I have actually seen a lot of support from the department, the faculty, the residents, in creating a formal mentoring program that focuses on issues of diversity and inclusion. We called it anastomosis, and it basically creates mentoring families that consist of a faculty mentor, a senior resident, a junior resident, and a medical student. And it helps create the safety net and a psychologically safe space to discuss issues not typically discussed in surgery. And those range from burnout to racial and gender discrimination to allyship to LGBTQ issues. And so it's been really great to have that space. In fact, Dr. Swanbull and Val are in the same group, and it is a truly inspiring group. I think a few major benefits, but I'll talk about two things. Number one, it is for everyone, not just for people who are interested in DEI. And I think that's incredibly important, because it is important to make sure that we include everybody in that conversation and everybody can learn from each other, which goes to my second point. The mentoring is actually bidirectional. And so at our last anastomosis meeting, for example, our attending had a patient that passed away, but didn't check on the residents, didn't talk to the medical students about processing such a difficult occurrence. And so as a group, we worked together to help him reach out to his medical students and residents to see how they were doing. And I think that was really meaningful for him. And so that's been really helpful. And I think that in terms of things that would be on the top of my list to address, I think that making sure that we continue to fund and promote these programs on an institutional level that help these efforts in diversity and inclusion. It is incredibly helpful to have that institutional and departmental support. I think we're very fortunate to have it at Michigan, but I don't think that's necessarily the case at every institution. And so continuing to do that on an administrative level is incredibly important.
Such great programs here at Michigan that we're really thankful to have. There was a question in the chat about, if mentorship isn't the only thing or isn't going to, solve all issues of DEI in surgery, what are the other programs or mechanisms or structures in place or that should be in place to help increase diversity in surgery? And I'll leave that open to anyone who wants to take a stab at it.
I have a little bit of a different hat on. And when I think about how you do anything, sort of how you do everything, it's really about intentionality and paying attention to the small details. And when we think about how do you improve essentially workforce diversity or representation, it comes down to sort of two things. How do you recruit the best and the brightest? And then more importantly than recruitment, I think this is what you were saying before, and I didn't catch the second part of your question. How do you retain people? Because it's not enough to bring somebody in your community. If you bring somebody into your community and they don't feel welcome, they don't feel invited, or you don't promote them or accelerate them in the same way, or recognize that there's differences in their path for just historic, for many different reasons and help overcome, then you're not really doing anybody anything except for just checking boxes that you have some type of number of people from various groups. And that's not what we do here, right? And so I think our department has been extraordinarily intentional about recruitment, both at the resident and faculty level, about doing things to try and make sure that the persons whom we recruit in are equally successful, at least in the environment that we can control. Not that there's not, other environment or influencers. We have things like boost teams and launch teams that go for faculty, that go for residents. I think that as an institution, we've started to look into this. I lead one of the strategic, Ferranmi's on it as well, as strategic initiatives through IHPI, which is actually looking at workforce diversity across the campus. And Tom Valley and Jade Burns, one who's a pulmonary critical care doc and one who is assistant professor in the School of Nursing, are essentially looking into how do we do that at University of Michigan? What lessons do we learn? And how do we retain people? Because we always talk about retention, but we never talk about prevention and how many people are leaving and what can we learn and what can we scale? And I think that we just have to be in this always constant mode of awareness that not everybody has the same path and not everybody has the same struggles. Intentionality, asking people how are they doing and what do they need, or helping people find things that they don't even know they need, which can happen, sometimes. And then continuing to do what we can, again, not just to check boxes, but to make sure that we're creating equitable environments for everybody that we bring into our home. And trying to scale that. I know we've been trying to scale some of those efforts nationally, but to Mary's point, not every institution is ready for change as we've been, and we can push it and we can push it, and the goal is to kind of set the standard, set the bar, and role model what we can, so that other people kind of want to come up and meet it. Also understanding that we have a lot to learn and we're at the beginning.
I think that one of the key elements in terms of making this DI effort successful, in addition to to this robust mentorship component and creating pushing for culture change to environments that are adequate, is also not taking your eye off the ball. So I think that complacency is very challenging, especially when we when this thing it works. We can get more students interested into surgery. I think we have an ungodly a lot of students matching on Monday. And I think that if you try, things will change. But we know from a number of different fields that you know, the natural course of things in like in an oppressive society that we live in is to move back toward like how things were before. And so I think that one of the most dangerous things both in undergraduate, graduate medical admissions on recruiting faculty is that like you just can't remove the pressure. And Dr. Brown was talking about that. And it's challenging because you're just like, I think that like there is a lot of exhaustion around the DEI message, especially because we have been so intentional at an organizational level, at a department level, like this is something we want to do. This is something we want to do. And it can feel strange and like very oppressive, especially if you are like a dominant group member or like maybe don't fully understand or have questions or things like that. I think it can be exhausting to be like, oh, we continue. I'm like, oh my God, when are we going to stop talking about this? But I think in the same way in which we never stop talking about clinical excellence and provided excellent care for patients and provided excellent training for residents, we can't stop the mission of trying to have a workforce that is diverse and in an environment that is inclusive. And it's something that just has to become part of what we do every single day, all day, and like something that we intentionally do, because like if we remove the pressure, things will go back to how they were. And so I think that in addition to like continuing to like move along efforts that have existed, that whole concept that Dr. Tellen brought up of like continuing to raise the bar so that we continue pushing ourselves away from any sort of complacency and just onto like trying to make sure that things continue to be good and even better. The medical school level, at every single stage in the area of the organization will be key to we're making sure that this change, this like small little boost that we have gotten over the last half a decade continues to move in the positive direction.
I would also add, just in terms of piggybacking off of Dr. Tellen and Dr. Valvana's points, is that making this in terms of like making sure that we're putting the emphasis on the leaders and administration as well to reward efforts in DEI. And so while people for promotion, for example, people are rewarded by the number of grants that they have, or, you know, maybe potentially at other institutions RVUs, I think that finding a metric where efforts for mentoring DEI or mentoring students or residents that are interested in DEI for promoting DEI efforts is also included in that evaluation as well.
I want to echo just the awesome points that have come before and say that this is such a multifaceted issue, and really the point about not just getting people in the door, but helping them be successful when we're here is so important. And one of the many hats I've worn has been a curriculum representative on the Medical Student Council. And so I've had kind of an inside look at some of the conversations, including around clinical grading, which is currently inherently biased. And so taking really just a wide scope and saying, what are our current practices and how are they discriminatory and what can we change is so important. And it's like Dr. Valbuena was saying, it's so slow to change the culture. And we talk about that a lot as applicants going through the residency process, that culture change is so slow. It's one of the main things you look at a program, because they can change various policies and things, but they're not likely to accomplish really big culture change in a short period of time. And so being intentional about it and taking those small steps and keeping the momentum and keeping the ball rolling is work, and it's going to be work, and we're going to be talking about it for a long time because we have to. And like I said, it goes back to the very basis of our educational system, as well as I'm sure the policies for employees once you're at a faculty level. You know, what are we paying people? Is it equal? These should be basic questions that haven't been examined everywhere yet.
Well, thanks so much. I just wanted to send a really sincere thank you to all of our panelists. It's an honor just to share this screen space with you, and when I'm really lucky to share the OR with you as well. So I am going to pass it over to Karen, who's going to transition to our poster session. Thanks so much.